The Green Bay Packers can't beat teams like the Eagles and the Lions if they don't start getting aggressive on fourth down.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet. And the show for fans who know what happened, they want to know why and how. Thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. You can get the playoff push going with a big return on FanDuel. New customers get a $5 bet right, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets. You got to win it, but just a $5 bet can turn that into $150. Go to FanDuel.com to get started. The Green Bay Packers have gone soft on fourth down decision-making. Matt LaFleur has been the most conservative coach in the NFL this year in kick-go decision-making. The most conservative. Ben Baldwin pointed this out, and our pal over at Acme Packing Company, Tex Western, wrote about it today. This has been a stark departure from going back to 2019. Matt LaFleur, through 2023, was one of the three most aggressive coaches in the league. In fact, they were #1 in Aaron Rodgers' final season in kick-go situations. They went consistently. But what happened in 2022, and to a lesser extent in 2023? LaFleur got freaked out by the outcomes and stopped trusting the process. Stopped trusting what the numbers were telling him. And part of the reason was he called a lot of bad plays on fourth down. Longtime listeners of this show, everydayers, will remember how many times over the years, the Al Lazard one is the one that sticks out in everyone's memory. You go, good decision to go for it, bad play call. For as creative as Matt LaFleur is and has been as an offensive designer and a play caller, his fourth down play calling has not been great. I love the Tucker Kraft quick sneak. Love that because you're not putting your quarterback at risk. You got a big, strong dude under center. Go get that. I love that. How many times can you run it? I don't know. But what they've been doing this year is rushing to the line, trying to get the team to jump, and then taking a delayed game penalty and kicking. And it has cost them games. It has cost them games this year. And the reason I bring it up now is not just because that part is true, not just because they just lost to the Lions who scored touchdowns on fourth down. You don't have to do that. But you are losing ground to the best teams in the division because Minnesota's more aggressive than you. You're losing ground to the best teams in the conference because Detroit and Philadelphia are not only more aggressive, they are elite at getting it. The tush push is still pert near unstoppable in Philadelphia. If it's fourth and short, they are getting it. And that affects the way that you play third down defense. You can't give up on 4th and 10. You can't give up 7 or 8 yards because they're just going to go almost anywhere on the field. That's certainly true of Detroit. And I understand you go back to that Detroit game and you say, well, they go on their own 30. They don't get it. The Packers score. Yeah, but that's who they are. It's part of their DNA. Go back to week 1. Just under 8 minutes remaining in the fourth quarter. The Packers have 4th and 5. Now remember, my cutoff. I have a cutoff. If you're a good offense, and the Packers are a good offense, 6 yards is the cutoff for me. In plus territory, anything less than 6 or less is a go. Is a go. Because 6 yards is an average play in the NFL, or is a good average play for a good offense. The Packers average over 6 yards per play this year. The best offenses average over 6 yards per play this year. Even if you want to cut it down to 5 and say, okay, well, even an average offense is going to average 5 yards per play, which is true. Then 4th and 5 at the 10, you have to go for it. And I was saying this in real time, and I got a lot of blowback from the take the points crowd. But here's what happened. Do you remember what happened? It was 31-26. The Packers kick a field goal to make a one-score game. We talked about it after the game. If they go for it and they get it, they have a chance to score a touchdown and take the lead. If they go for it and they don't get it, there's 8 minutes remaining in the game, and the Eagles have the ball at their own 8-yard line or wherever the play ends up. You're making them drive the length of the field. This was a win probability difference of almost 7% that the Packers gave up, according to the Ben Baldwin model. That is a huge number. You can't do that. Now, Tex went through all of the cases, and there are some where it's just sort of like, I don't really see the value in it. Like there's a Rams game, 4th and 2 at their own 13. No one's doing that. The Texans, 4th and 1 at their own 13. No one's doing that. Like the model says go because you're probably going to get the 1 yard, but this doesn't work like that. Now, the Lions game, in the first Lions game, Packers had 4th and 1 in plus territory. 4th and 1 at Detroit's 44. You have to go for that. You have to go. And they did. Good for them. But that was the only one of these where they actually went 4th and 5 at the Detroit 12 on that first possession. The Packers kick the field goal. The Lions come down and score. And it was never really, on the scoreboard at least, close after that. The number said, go for that. Another one in that same game, it's 4th and 6 at the Detroit 28. What is my cutoff? 6 yards. Go for it. Especially at the 28-yard line in bad weather, they end up settling for a 46-yard field goal that is missed. If you're settling for a high 40s field goal rather than going on 4th and 6 or less, you're making the wrong choice. The Packers had 2 chances last week to right this wrong. 4th and 6 at the Green Bay 49. Midfield, you got to go. And then 4th and 5 at the Lions 47. They went and they did the thing where they motion, and nothing happened. You have one of the most dynamic offenses in football, one of the most creative quarterbacks in football, one of the best, most creative, most dynamic play callers in football. You have to get back to being aggressive. Don't let the outcomes. It is so clear that the outcomes are in Matt LaFleur's head, because he had good process for a long time. And then 2022, in a year where you're dealing with rookie Romeo Doubs and an injured and then rookie Christian Watson and Aaron Rodgers, who had fully checked out. That was when they led the league in the modeling, when they were the most right team going for it in situations when the models said go. They just weren't very good at doing it because offensively they weren't a very good offense. This is a very good offense. This is the same point basically that I've made over and over about the red zone offense, which by the way has gotten significantly better. If you just let them go, just let them cook in these situations, they are going to reward you more often than not. So don't coach scared. And it starts this week on the road, a playoff team, a division leading team. You need every point you can get. That means touchdowns, not field goals. Do not settle for kicking. And I think here is the simple rule. This is a nice heuristic, I think. On 4th and 10, you're not going to go out there and try and draw a team offsides. They're not going to jump, because what is 5 yards really getting you? Now, you might on 4th and 8 to try and make it 4th and 3 and then go for it. But the Packers are doing this on 4th and 5, 4th and 6. just go. If the plan is, if your brain says, go and try and get him to jump. No, just go and run a play. Just go and try and get 6 yards. You're probably going to get 6 yards. Against some of the best defenses in the league this year, the Packers have been able to average over 6 yards, 7 yards per play. Go get the yards, have the plays in there, and call your third down plays with the idea that you are going to get a fourth down opportunity. When you can play with 4 downs instead of 3, the Eagles and the Lions are seeing the value. You cannot fall behind because of getting burned a couple times with outcomes instead of process. Matt LaFleur talks all the time about process and how they trust the process and they believe in their process. Right now, they are not living that mantra because they do not believe in, they do not trust their own process when it comes to fourth downs. Now, Matt LaFleur has said, I don't ask going into a play, hey, what do the numbers say here? He just kind of does it by gut. Maybe he needs to just reacquaint himself with the numbers that say, really, 4th and 5 or less, almost anywhere on the field for a good offense is a good bet to go. Anything in plus territory of 4th and 5 or less, go. Go. And 4th and 1, almost anywhere on the field, is pretty much a go. Like, that's what the numbers say. I know that that's a little aggressive. Like, if you're at your own 30, I understand the risk that you feel like you're taking to not get much reward. I think that's a fair way to look at it. But if you're beyond your own 40, I'm going. And so is Detroit, and so is Philadelphia. And if you're not, you're falling behind. Now, defensively, the Packers are doing some weird and interesting things. One thing in particular, I did not see coming at all. Why is it happening? We'll talk about that next on Locked On Packers. Today's episode is sponsored by Built Rewards. If you're a renter, listen up. This is a total game changer. Thanks to Built, you can now earn points on rent payments, just like you do with groceries or travel. Paying rent now comes with serious perks, and it's completely free to join. Earn valuable Built points on your rent and everyday spending at no extra cost. Redeem points for flights, hotel stays, and even future rent payments. With over 500 airlines and 700,000 hotels in their program, the possibilities are endless. Access unique experiences that are exclusive to Built members. I love using points for travel. Built makes it so easy to turn rent into rewards. If you're already paying rent, why not make it work for you? Start earning points on rent you're already paying by going to joinbuilt.com. That's joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNFL. Make sure to use the link so they know we sent you. Don't wait. Start earning rewards today. Our friend Wendell Fajeda pointed out an interesting stat yesterday. The Packers are second in the league in cover 2 usage. This has been a growing trend this year. The Vikings have been a big cover 2 team, cover 2 invert, so normal cover 2, you have your corners on the outside. They're hugged up and they're playing that underneath. And then you have the safeties. You got deep half. When you invert it, think about what happens. Those responsibilities flip. So teams have been doing this. The Vikings love to show pressure and then get out to this, what you can also call non-traditional Tampa. The Packers have started doing it. And it was just not something that I saw as at all likely for the Packers to do when Jeff Hafley arrived. So I do what I often do when I see something that I go, why? Not in a critical way, just in a curiosity kind of way. So I talked to a source that I trust, and I said, hey, what do you think this is? Why do you think the Packers are doing this? And they said, well, for starters, it's a too high look, right? So you're capping the corners. You're allowing them to play up, which does 2 things. Number one, you have your 2 deep safeties, which allows you to say, We're not going to give up plays down the field, which the Packers have been really good at this year. They're still one of the best teams negating the deep ball. They do not give up deep balls. And it allows you to play run defense from light boxes because your corners are hugged up. So when you have a corner that is now a forced player, if you're playing cover 3, let's say, and you're off, it's hard as a run defender from a corner to fill from 8 yards depth. But if you're already hugged up, it makes it easier for you to be that forced player on the edge. You're playing light boxes. You're still trying to stop the run with light boxes. Now, the problem with it is the middle of the field is where you can attack unless you have freak linebackers. And the Packers, when it's not Quay Walker and Edgerrin Cooper, don't have guys who, from a movement skill standpoint, can cover enough ground. They're not, but what I like about it, let me say this. What I like about it is I have long been an advocate for cover 2. In fact, this is why this is so interesting to me. Because what you're forcing teams to do is you are either going to throw those seam shots middle of the field where it can be crowded in there. If your guys are getting proper depth and all those things. Or the defense is going to force you to hit those hole shots on the sidelines. Those are difficult throws to make. And not every quarterback is comfortable going, yeah, I'm going to try and hit that shot between a corner who's clouding that side, and then you've got the safety over the top, especially when that safety is Xavier McKinney. You got to have real arm strength. Now, someone like Geno Smith, he's willing and capable of making those throws, to be sure. But I like forcing a quarterback to make a throw versus saying, well, we're just not going to give up anything. Like the quarters idea is a lot of, well, we're just not going to give up any big plays. Well, you're also not taking anything away, really, unless you can get pressure with 4. Now, this source that I spoke to also said the front's playing pretty well. And he included the linebackers, and then the blitzing is a part of this. You're seeing Jeff Hafley borrow some of the Brian Flores playbook to say, all right, we're going to show 6 in the middle of the field. And you're going to have to sort it out. And then we're going to get to this non-traditional coverage shell. And we're going to have this linebacker who's hauling ass that way, and this safety who's actually going to be in the slot. And how are you going to get the alignment? It's going to end up too high, and we'll see about the coverage specifically, but it's going to be a weird, non-traditional, too high safety look. You're creating indecision in the quarterback's mind. Now, if you can't get home, it's not going to ultimately matter, right? Because indecision, but if I have time to read it out as a quarterback, if I have time to go to 1 to 2 to 3, I'm going to find somebody. So you still have to be getting pressure. And this week in particular, Mike McDonald is this coordinator. Simulated pressures, blitz looks. He's going to try and confuse you with safety rotation and stuff on the back end. But what also can happen, and when you live in that world, is you can spin your safeties or stunt your line into explosive runs. And the Seahawks, they're giving up almost 5 yards of carry on the ground. They cannot stop the run. The Packers have been able to stop the run this season, and they're getting better stopping the run from those too high safety looks, in part because their corners have been willing to be forced players on the outside. They're not just dying out there, like a bad defensive guard on a pick where that guy just dies on the pick and there's nothing you can do because now you're in scramble mode. Even guys who are not playing great in coverage, guys like Eric Stokes and Carrington Valentine are out there and they're giving good effort in those situations and giving your alley defenders and your overhang defenders time to get over to those outside runs when those opportunities are there. This Packers front, though, is going to have to eat this week against Seattle because We don't know what the status of Jair Alexander is going to be. We don't know what they're going to have all their corners. Evan Williams is still in concussion protocol as of today. You may see him on this program very soon. Hopefully he's healthy. So this is one of the worst pass blocking offensive lines in the league. By any metric, by any stat, by any film watching standard, it's a bad group. You have to create pressure with four in this group, but you may have to rely on some funky looks. You may have to go to some 5-man pressures and get the ball out. And Geno Smith leads the league in interceptions when blitzed this year. So I expect the Seattle Seahawks to try and have some answers, but I also expect Jeff Hafley to bring the pressure. He has to be willing to do it. This has been a below average blitz team this year. They've been preferring to show pressure, back out, and try and confuse you with coverage and win with their front. It is working to a point. And I think it will work better against the bad offensive line, which is what the Seattle Seahawks have. But we also thought that might be true against the Chicago Bears a couple weeks ago, and the Packers couldn't win one-on-one. Now, it's different because this is a tackle problem. Charles Cross has been one of the most leaky pass-protecting tackles in the league this year. He's not a big guy. He's more of a finesse pass blocker, which means Rashawn Gary, Lucas Van Ness, Kingsley Enagbare, these power pass rushers. I think this is an opportunity for them to just run through his face and try and pressure Geno. I think you're going to see some of those double A gap pressures. I would like to, if Edgerrin Cooper can play, that would be so huge because you just unleash him in this game. You just say, just get after Geno Smith. And I think that gives the Packers a really good chance to win this game. There's a reason they're favorites, but they opened as 3.5-point favorites. According to our friends at FanDuel, it's down to 2.5. That's action on Seattle, bringing that line down. I think part of that is injury. I think part of that is this defense is playing really well the last couple of weeks. Packers offense is going to have to bring its A game. They're going to have to, be nice to have Romeo Doubs back, but he's in concussion protocol. That's a scary thing. We'll talk about that more on our crossover tomorrow with Corbin. The Packers can clinch the playoffs. They can. On Sunday against the Seahawks. We'll talk about it next on Locked On Packers. Hey, Locked On Packers fans. I know if you're like me and your holiday shopping list is, let's say, far from complete, although I'm getting there. I really am. If that's the case, I've got the perfect gift for the passionate sports fan in your life. Perhaps you've heard of Ice Shaker. Ice Shaker is now officially licensed with the NFL, with the NHL, with the NBA, with the NCAA, with Major League Baseball, and it will make a great gift. I love mine. I absolutely love it. It looks awesome, and it's kitchen-grade stainless steel, so it's not going to absorb odor. This is created by and used by the Gronkowski brothers. Ice Shakers have sold over 1 million bottles, and they've changed the game. Right now, you go to iceshaker.com and use the code LOCKEDONNFL. You can save 25% off your order. Plus, these are third-party tested, and they will hold ice for 30 hours. Plus, it's customizable. You can send them your logo, custom shop, turnaround time on custom bottles, only 3 to 5 days. Come on. Order your team-branded bottle today at Ice Shaker and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for 25% off your order. Ice Shaker, show your support for your team with the best branded workout bottles on the market. Ice Shakers. The Green Bay Packers can clinch a playoff spot on Sunday. They can do it by beating Seattle and then having the Rams and the 49ers tie. Or the Falcons lose to the Raiders. Neither one of those things is particularly likely. I think it would be good for Green Bay to have to win for as long as possible. Now, I made the case on The Leap yesterday, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to, that it would be better in the NFL and for everyone if the Packers were playing for a home playoff game, because if you seeded this just by record in the NFC, they would be one of the 4 best teams by record in the NFL. And it seems ridiculous that an NFC South and an AFC West team, or an NFC West team, could host home playoff games against Packers and Vikings teams that could conceivably win 12, 13, even 14. I guess the Vikings probably couldn't. Well, I don't know how the tiebreakers work with the Vikings and the Lions, but they could win 13 games. Each one of these teams could win 13 games and have to go on the road and play a 10-win division winner. That's absurd. That's absurd. And if you had it the other way, where this was just winning the division got you into the playoffs, everything else after that is record, I think it solves the problem that, for example, in two games, if the Vikings have won each of their next 2 games, that Week 17 game against Green Bay basically doesn't matter. Basically doesn't matter. So it's one of the, not for Green Bay anyway. And so it's one of those things where if home playoff games were on the line, it would. The NFL is already backloading all of these division games. Wouldn't it be better if those division games also had real meaning? I think it would be better for Green Bay, even under the current rules, to have to play that game like it means something. Like, I think they're going to want to beat the Vikings. They're going to want to beat the Bears in the last game of the season, though I am fascinated to see how they handle that. It's not that I don't want the Packers to clinch. I want them to win. I want them to keep winning. And I want them to feel like they have to keep winning. Because we've just seen this too many times over the years. I mean, there was that Colts team. I know we remember these outliers. But that Colts team had everything wrapped up the first or second week in December. And they just kind of sleptwalked through the final month. And it's like, yeah, that's probably not the best way to go into the playoffs. If the Packers get to week 17 and they're playing for basically nothing the last 2 weeks, what is there to think about? What is there to worry about? Like the Packers and the Commanders, if the Commanders lose one more time and the Packers win 2 more times, it's basically over. So I want the Packers to have to be locked in. Yes, it is the case. We talked about this with Lily yesterday. That if you can't get focused for these games, that says something about your team. And if the fact that you couldn't get focused at the end of the season carries over to the playoffs and hurts your ability to win playoff games, then it's probably a pretty good indication that you were not as good a team as maybe you thought you were. I think all that is true. But I also think that the best thing is for the Packers to have to win as many games as possible. I want them to want the 5 seed. Not because they want the Falcons or the Bucks necessarily. I want them to want the 5 seed because it means they'll have won a lot of games. Because it means they'll have passed the Vikings, which I know they want to do. But I also see the appeal of a Week 18 rest fest. You win the next 2 games, maybe you win the next 3 games. And now you're 12-4 going into the last game of the season. 3, 4, whatever it is. Yeah. Can you 12-4. I don't know why I'm questioning the math. 12-4. Because that seems complete to me. 16-game season. It's just screwing me up in my head. And then it doesn't really matter. You could play Malik Willis. I think there'd be value in that too. To just get some guys some rest. You never know who might need the week off with injury. I think that's fine. I think the fear that people have of, oh, well, if you rest that last guy, I don't buy that. I think it hurt the Bears in 2010 that they went into Green Bay, they didn't rest their starters, and they lost. I will always believe that they're like neither in nor out way of handling that game. They either needed to not play their guys. They still got the home playoff game at the end. They either needed to not play their guys and lose, or play the game to win. It didn't seem like they did either of those things because they did. I was there. They did not seem to play the game to win. They did not seem super locked in that game. Certainly offensively, Jay Cutler could not stop throwing the ball to the other team. Now, maybe that is partly just Jay Cutler. I see both sides of that part of it. I like what LaFleur HAS said yesterday. It would be nice for the Packers, who are now third in the NFL in DVOA. They're ahead of the Vikings. In the NFL, they're ahead of the Eagles. To show this is a no doubt solid to good team. A team that is now the favorite to win the NFC West. 2 games above 500. 7-5 is not a bad record. But they are a deeply flawed football team. Especially in the trenches. With Tucker Kraft, what he said yesterday, we talked about yesterday, the focus, the force that they want to play with, the intent that they want to play with. Go out and put your stamp on this moment. This is not a huge game in the scope of the season. But if you want to show you are a big game hunter, that you are capable of taking down the top prey in the conference, this is a game that you go out and you play the first 4-quarter football game that you have played all season. And then we get to come on here and talk about how this Packers team is as scary as anyone in the NFC. And hopefully you don't have a letdown game against Spencer, Hainer, Rattler, whatever's happening with the Saints. But we'll see. Back tomorrow, crossover Thursday. And then hopefully we have an interview to talk to you about on Friday. Well, we will, but I'm hopeful it is going to be who I hope it is. That's all I can say for now. Follow me on all the social medias. Peter_Bukowski. All the social medias for the podcast, Locked On Packers. Subscribe over on YouTube, where we'll be live Sunday night, so you can stay Locked On Packers.